Good afternoon. Happy Wednesday afternoon. I guess technically it's evening since it's after 6 o'clock, but how y'all doing? Man, you know, it's just a feel-good kind of a moment. Anybody see Rocky 3? Remember Rocky 3? Great movie. The first three Rockies, the first three Rockies were all just great, iconic movies. Just, man, it takes you back to the great movies that were made in the 80s, you know, but just made you feel good about America, right? You know, and what brought this to my mind was someone had asked the question, you know, when was the last time you heard any black or African American artists, I think would probably be the more accurate term in this case, who wrote songs or performed songs declaring their love for America. Because when you look at this current generation, excuse me, my nose is itching, I don't know why, sorry about that. You look at this current generation of artists who have grown up really as some of the most spoiled people in the world. You know, most of them, they've never known, I mean, of course, we've had the Iran-Iraq war, the Gulf War, and all that. But really, they've been spoiled. They've never really known hardships. They haven't had hardships like, the Great Depression. They've never been drafted. None of that. Really, they've been living off the fat of the land for their entire life. And, but yet, these are people who really, if you get down to it, most of them don't even like this country. That's my biggest criticism of the people who I call African Americans. You know, and once again, if you're new to this page and you start realizing I am not an African American, I am an American black man. My family are descendants of slaves who were taken from Africa and brought to the United States. We've been able to definitively trace that, obviously. We even know where in Africa my family lines come from. And my father's side comes from Angola. My mother's side comes from Cameroon and Gabon. And we've actually even been able to trace from my paternal lineage where, there's white folks in my family line, that sort of genealogy. But anyway, all that being said, it's just interesting to me just to be around so many people who look like me, who have similar melanin contents that I have in their skin, and kind of getting to understand that they really don't like America, which annoys the heck out of me, because I'm like, well, why haven't you left yet? I mean, that's always the thing. I look at it the same way as saying, if you have a friend, and every time you're around that friend, all they do is gripe and moan about their husband or their wife. And my question is, so why the hell are you still with them? I mean, I'm not an advocate of divorce, but I do we can get divorces in the United States. It's relatively easy. Heck, we even have no-fault divorces, right? But it's relatively easy to get a divorce, and it's really easy to divorce yourself in the United States, to renounce your citizenship and move somewhere else. And so if every time I talk to you, you're always griping and moaning about your husband or your wife, and I actually had this happen before, where I said that to someone, and they got upset at me. But I said, well, it sounds like you don't even love your husband or your wife. I mean, literally, I had this conversation with somebody, and they got indignant with me for saying it sounds like you don't even love them. Because they're like, well, what would make you say that? I'm like, because every time I talk to you, you have nothing but negative things to say about them. See, if you're around me and my wife, or if you're just around me, even when I'm talking with the fellas, I might joke around and we might crack a few jokes about, the challenges of being a husband and the fact that women can be God's special creatures and that only he understands them. But I'll tell you what, I love my wife and I think the world of my wife. I enjoy spending time with my wife. If I have a choice to do one thing, I hang out with the fellas on occasion or whatever like that, but essentially where I choose to spend my time, where I desire to spend my time is with my wife. So I speak highly of my wife. And, is she perfect? No, she's not perfect. And will she tell you that I'm perfect? Well, yeah, probably. Just a joke. That's a joke. No, I am not perfect. Hey, John, how you doing in Austin? But no, she'll let you know that living with me is not perfect. I have my own ways about me that can irk her nerves, but my wife speaks highly of me. Whenever I meet co-workers of hers or anything like that, they're always saying, oh, we've heard so much about you. Oh, she just says so many great things about you. So when I think about that and I bring that back to, I got my halo again, right? And I bring that back to the way you talk about America. I just always want to say, it's like, if you just think so little of the United States, if you have such a huge problem with the United States, why are you still here? Why do you not speak highly of your country? Why do you not speak highly of your spouse? That's just, I bet there's a correlation there, right? Find somebody who speaks highly of their spouse. I'd be willing to bet that they probably also speak highly of this country. That's, it's not an absolute, but, it'd be something, I'm asking you, when you're around, start thinking about that. Listen to family and friends or whatever like that. And those who speak negatively of the country, look and see, how do they speak about their spouse, and vice versa. Those who speak negatively of their spouse, kind of pay attention to how they speak about the United States. Which is just to totally jump over, change subject for a second. It's interesting as I'm in Maryland, or actually technically I'm still in the District of Columbia, or as I call it, the occupied territories of the District of Columbia. And I just saw, going on the opposite direction, there's a traffic camera. And that sucker just flashed and got several people, because the speed limit going through here is 50 miles per hour. And that thing gets people all the time. I can tell as I'm seeing people going the opposite direction, I'm like, he's going to get a ticket, he's going to get a ticket, he's going to get a ticket. And in the occupied territory of the District of Columbia, I believe that ticket is somewhere in the neighborhood of at least $100 for exceeding the speed limit. And that's one of the ways that they get revenue. And it's just interesting because they have those cameras here in the District of Columbia and also over in Maryland. But there are like no traffic cameras like that over in the free Commonwealth of Virginia, where I live, which also is a place that does not infringe upon your unalienable right to bear arms. It's kind of interesting how you see that correlation, is that your rights are infringed here in the District of Columbia and they're not in Virginia. They have traffic cameras here in the District of Columbia. They don't have them across the river in Virginia. So when you cross the Iron Curtain of the Potomac, you're going into the free Commonwealth of Virginia. So just, anyway, interesting side note. But yeah, the whole living in America thing, I was listening, going back to, see, you thought I lost my place, going back to that question about artists in America, and none of them ever kind of writing songs, and at least in the black artists, right, African American artists, I don't hear them proclaiming anything great about America. Yet none of them are trying to leave this country. But and that question was brought up, when is the last time you heard someone make a song or speak highly of America? And I thought about like Ray Charles and Jim Brown. You should watch the Ray Charles movie, right? With that portrayed by Jamie Foxx, who, Jamie Foxx is an industrial grade moron. He's a very, very talented man, ridiculously talented man. He can act very well. He can sing his butt off. He's a very funny guy. He just happens to be, hey, Joe Hancock, how you doing? Jamie Foxx just happens to be an industrial grade moron who I wish he would just shut up and sing, act, and make us laugh instead of engaging political rhetoric, because he gets stuck on stupid and he's outside of his wheelhouse when he goes there. But he did a phenomenal job portraying Ray Charles. And, you know, kind of made me do some more research. And my father's a big fan of Ray Charles. And listening to Ray Charles sing America the Beautiful, you can tell that he was singing that from his soul. He wasn't just performing a song. He was singing that from his soul. And when you consider that Ray Charles and James Brown, those guys, they grew up and they experienced real racism. Right? I mean, they experienced being treated as lesser human beings. You know, basically, here they're brought in to perform, but essentially being told, you know, you got to go around the back door, right? You know, instead of, you're the superstar, we're paying you money to perform in front of this crowd, but go in around the corner to the nigger entrance, right? That's what, you know, that's the kind of crap they endured. Yet and still, those two men loved America. And I just think it's fascinating that you have James Brown and Ray Charles, who grew up in the Jim Crow era, grew up in the Jim Crow South, and they loved this country. They loved it. They proclaimed their love for this country. They traveled all over the world. They were world-renowned artists. Standing ovations. I mean, you know, James Brown performed with Pavarotti. That's something good. If you want to hear a great song, one of my favorite songs by James Brown is It's a Man's World. Go on YouTube and Google James Brown and Pavarotti and listen to them sing It's a Man's World. Phenomenal performance. Just a wonderful performance. You know, and that's one of my favorite songs. I've heard it done many different renditions, many different covers of it. And the same thing, go in YouTube, and I'll probably, if I can, I'll paste the link to it, but go and check it out on YouTube with Ray Charles singing God Bless America. Now, I point that out because, for example, you can look at John Legend, the music artist John Legend, who is a talented guy. I don't really care much for his music, but he's talented. He can sing and he can play the piano, but he's also a Marxist-minded, talented thinker, industrial grade moron. And you know, but he performed God Bless America at Super Bowl 49, I believe it was. And I said, well, you know, let me go back and look at his performance compared to the performance that I've seen from Ray Charles, where he did one, you know, where he's done God Bless America on multiple occasions. And you know what came to my mind, and maybe this is my bias, I'm willing to acknowledge that maybe I'm biased by the fact that I just don't like John Legend. You know, but when you go and look and watch the differences in performances, in my opinion, when Ray Charles was performing the song God Bless America, that was coming from his heart. That this was, you know, with all his experiences, you know, experiencing flat out racism, you know, all over the country. Like, you know, they barred him in his home. Was it Georgia, I think, you know, and he was barred from Georgia or whatever it was. But once again, watch the movie Ray with Jamie Foxx. But yet and still, with all that, Ray Charles loved America, and you could tell, you can feel it. See, I always talked about like soul music, right? I grew up, my parents are from Motown, you know, and so I grew up listening to soul music and R&B soul. I like the fact because it's something that you should be able to feel it, and you can feel when someone is feeling the song as opposed to when someone is just singing the song. To me, it's the same thing as like gospel music. You can sing a song, but it has a whole different feel when it comes across totally different when somebody's really feeling it. It's the same way with somebody, you know, anybody can say, I love you. right? Just like the guy who just wants to get into a girl's pants, he can just say, you know, I love you, right? As opposed to when somebody is truly proclaiming their undying love for you, it has a totally different feel. And that's the way, maybe, once again, I'm willing to acknowledge that maybe this is my own bias against that schmuck, John Legend. But when I watched John Legend perform God Bless America, it just seemed like something he was performing because he was getting paid to perform. As opposed to Ray Charles, that was from his soul. And so I call this, you know, living in America, and I feel good. Because here I am, I'm just getting ready to drive out of the capital of the United States, out of the occupied territory of the District of Columbia. And, you know, I used to work on Capitol Hill, in case you didn't know. I did an internship for my congressman. That's what brought me out here to the Washington, D.C. And one of the things I enjoyed doing when I was on the Hill is I actually, you know, the jobs that other interns didn't want to do, which was giving tours of the Capitol Hill complex to constituents. I enjoyed doing that because it gave me the opportunity to study more about the history of this country, and I gained a greater appreciation for this country. And also, one other thing, if you haven't known or if you haven't checked out the Unhyphenated America webpage, please do so. It's just www.unhyphenatedamerica.org. So it's unhyphenatedamerica.org, and you can look and see some of the articles that I've done. Like, for example, talking about my childhood growing up as a Air Force brat overseas in Germany in the 1980s during the Cold War, and see what my experiences were, as I talked about that I was unhyphenated before I even knew what that meant. So, you know, I was raised really, and if any of you are fellow military brats, especially if you grew up overseas, I actually grew up in a hyper-American environment. It's funny, I grew up overseas in a foreign country, but yet the culture that I grew up in and that I was surrounded by was a hyper-American culture. Yet and still, it's funny, when I moved back stateside and I began to get exposed to people who did not grow up in that environment, and I would hear them basically speak ill of this country. And but yet I'm someone who had been to East Berlin, was it 2 or 3 times? So that was you know, an interesting experience. Like going to East Berlin during the Cold War, crossing the Berlin Wall, crossing the Iron Curtain into the, you know, Berlin Wall, and looking at, you know, because of what my father did, we were able to go to Checkpoint Charlie and actually go up on one of the security stands and look over. Not just kind of look at the wall, but look over into East Germany, East Berlin, and see how drab it was and cinder blocked and gray and just oppressed it looked. And if you go to the Checkpoint Charlie Museum, which I believe is still there, and see all the measures that people took to find ways to escape from the tyranny of communism, of leftist, regressive, socialist ideology. You know, that they took apart cars and put people in the wheel wells of cars. Yes, they took, I mean, think about that. You get stuffed into the wheel well of a car, or they created compartments behind the engines, you know, to try to sneak people out of East Germany with the knowledge that if you were caught, everybody was going to die. At worst, at best, you were going to end up in jail for life, beaten, tortured, so on and so forth. But you also might end up dead, and everybody who took part in trying to help you get out was going to die. So all that in mind, and I come back to the United States, and I'm driving around, and I've traveled all over this country. The only place I have not, and I've done a lot of it by car, I've flown a lot also, but I like to drive. You know, I like driving. It's just relaxing for me to drive, and I get a chance to see things. You know, I get a chance to think, and I get a chance to see things. And I've driven all over this country. Pretty much the only places I have not driven, I haven't driven the Pacific Coast, you know, from like San Diego, for example, up to Washington, up to Seattle, Washington. But I've driven all over. I mean, from, you know, Nevada to Colorado, Utah, and pretty much everywhere east. And I haven't gone up to as far as Maine, although I did go there when I was growing up as a child because we were stationed in Maine when I was a little kid, but I don't have any memories of it. But as an adult, I have driven everywhere from not New Hampshire, but Rhode Island, all the way south to the Keys. And of course, all over Texas, Colorado, the whole Midwest, done it all. And this is a phenomenal country. It's like, do you realize that when you look just from the terrain itself, that with the exception of a tropical rainforest, every sort of topography that exists on planet Earth is found in one of the states, in one of our 50 states or territories. And of course, the tropical rainforest can be found in Puerto Rico, which is a U.S. territory. So basically, every type of territory, up to every type of topography that you want to experience can be found within the United States of America. You know, now, of course, you travel to other countries and you get the experience, the different cultures and languages of those other countries. But in terms of just kind of seeing the sights, you know, America is abundantly blessed. But, you know, it's not the land that's why America is blessed. It's because of our culture. It's because of the American dream, the ideology that makes you an American, the belief that, you know, in that if you believe in it, if you embrace the principles of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, then you're an American. And as I always say, there's no need for any prefix or suffix. You're just an American. And that mindset of free enterprise, capitalism, that is why America is blessed. That is why America is as wealthy as it is, that our per capita output is much greater than anyone else. And all you got to do is let's go back to the Soviet Union, our former sworn enemy. The former Soviet Union was the largest country in the world. And the only natural resource that the former Soviet Union did not have within its borders, within its control, was direct access to a warm water port. Every other type of natural resource you could conceive of wanting, the Soviet Union either, you know, had within the borders of Russia or within one of its satellite states. I mean, you name it. Minerals, they were rich with minerals. I mean, iron ore, platinum, uranium, you know, you name it, copper, they have it. Bauxite, aluminum, the list goes on and on. Natural gas, they have a crap load of natural gas. They have a ton of coal. They have all the things that you would want. They have river systems. They have their area around the Ural Mountains is essentially their Great Plains. That is the perfect type of environment and climate to grow grain and stuff like that, the same way we do in our great Midwest. So why was it that the former Soviet Union could barely feed itself? Well, it's because of their ideology. That's it. Leftist, regressive, socialist ideology will have you stuck on stupid and have you damn near starving because it's a stupid ideology. That's why I go hard in the paint against that. Anytime somebody talks about leftism, I tell you, there's only two types of people who promote leftism: foolish people and wicked people. The foolish people, I try to educate them. I try to inform them at the very least and hopefully educate them. The wicked people, I let them know that I know that they're wicked and I keep my eye on them because they're dangerous. But you know, with the United States, man, it's great to be in America. It is phenomenal to be in America. On its best day, on its worst day, rather, is what I meant to say. You'd rather be here than anywhere else. I mean, you can just kick out the stats, right? I mean, that the average American, I mean, the amount of space that we live in, you know, the square footage. It's like my wife and I were over in Crystal City, Virginia, which is not too far south of the Pentagon, next to Reagan National Airport, and we were looking at prices, just at apartments and condos. And for example, there are condos there that have hyperinflated prices, where you're talking about for essentially a studio type condo where the rent is like, I think I saw like $2,100 $500 a month for like a 500 square foot place. And, you know, we were sitting there going, oh my God, that's just ridiculous. That's a tiny place. And then I had to stop and remind myself that if you go to Europe, you know, 500 or 600 square feet is about what the average person or family of 2 or 3 lives in Europe and in many parts of the world. See, so our expectations, we don't even realize, most of us don't even realize just how out of whack our mindset is. We're so privileged. And we're looking like, what do you mean I can't have, and we're going like, oh, our family of 4 is living in, let's say 2,100 square feet. We're like, oh, it's cramped. You know, and it's like, if you look at the rest of the world, you'd have like 10 people living in 2,100 square feet. And we think it's absurd to have that many people living in 2,100 square feet. You know, it's, you know, we're like, oh, you know, we almost want to have like, in many neighborhoods, we want to have like rules to say, oh, you can't have that many people living in that amount of square feet. In most apartments, they'll say that the occupancy rate, or the number of people, obviously, occupancy rate is this number of people. And, you know, because we're like, man, there's 10 people in this 3-bedroom, 2-bath apartment. You know, and these people who are immigrants, typically that happens with immigrants, and they're like, dude, back in whatever country we came from, this will be the norm. There wouldn't be 10 people living in a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. There'd be 15 people. So our expectations are out of whack compared to the rest of the world. We're so spoiled. And I'm not saying spoiled as a condemnation. I'm saying it's just, we're blessed like that. We have abundance like that. And the people, many of the people who are always whining and crying about how bad things are in America, you know, I go back and I reference what, you know, one of my mentors, and I don't say mentor in terms of he and I having a personal relationship, but I kind of feel like he's a mentor to me from the standpoint that I've read all of his books and listened to his audios and watched YouTube videos. Guys like Thomas Sowell and, of course, Walter Williams and Milton Friedman, I feel like they've been mentors to me. And that Austrian School of Economics, and one of the things that Thomas Sowell frequently says when people make these statements about how bad things are, you know, we always ask the 3 questions. Well, you know, compared to what, at what cost, and where's your hard data? So when people disparage the United States, I always ask, compared to what? What is the basis that you're using to disparage the United States? That's why you look at weapons-grade morons like Bernie Sanders. And just to clarify, because you probably have seen or seen me write and talk about the different levels of moron, that I know it's not nice, but I don't care. I'm not nice when it comes to leftists. There's 3 grades of moron. It's the museum grade moron is your average garden variety leftist who promotes and supports leftism because in many cases they think it just means that they're going to get free stuff. You know, they're the ones who are hoping that someone else's wealth is going to be redistributed to them, so they think that's all well and good. And that's nothing but greed, envy, and covetousness, right? So, and these are the people who don't realize just how dangerous their ideology is if they empower certain people to be able to move about these things. They don't realize that things quickly fall into socialism or communism as it really is, where it's an oppressive force. So anyway, you know, that's the masses of people who tend to vote a particular way. You know, they're the museum grade morons. Like all the people that you see at Bernie Sanders rallies and Hillary rallies and all that, yeah, those are museum grade morons. You know, the ones who are crying out for more socialism. But then the people I tend to refer to as industrial grade morons, they're a little bit stronger in their moronic thought process. And I tend to refer to them as like the talking heads that you'll see from the left on MSNBC or CNN or whatever like that. It's a lot of the athletes and entertainers who are running around, you know, espousing the virtues of leftism, you know, but, you know, so they have influence. They essentially, that's what it is. College professors, they're all industrial grade morons. And like I said, I call them that because they're the ones who have the ability to influence. They got the big microphone and the ability to influence the thoughts of others. But the weapons grade morons are the people who have the ability to create policy, to create and enforce policy. And I despise those people. They're all wicked. Everybody who's a weapons grade moron is a wicked person, because you know what? They all pretty much know that what they're advocating doesn't work. You know, they know it doesn't work. They don't really care. All they want is power and control. You know, they want the power, they want the money, they want the control, and they know that if they just keep promoting this idea of fairness, the redistribution of wealth, and they keep promising that, then the museum grade morons will vote for them and give them the power, and they'll get wealthy, like Maxine Waters. You know, although, you know what, I don't even know if I would call Maxine Waters. I mean, yes, she's a member of Congress, and which doesn't speak highly of the people in her congressional district. But I don't even think Maxine actually knows that leftism doesn't work. I don't think she's that smart. You know, I think that's just, people like Maxine Waters or Sheila Jackson Lee, basically most of the members of the Congressional Black Caucus. I don't think most of those people are that smart. And they don't really care. I almost kind of put them halfway between industrial grade and weapons grade morons. But people like POTUS 44, yeah, that's a wicked man. He's a very, very wicked person. And all the people he's in bed with, the George Soros and all that, very, very wicked people. And but at the end of the day, circling back to kind of wrap this up, the greatness of America. And I've said this before, if you've never tuned in, I always give this caveat. Perfection is not a requirement for greatness. You say that again. Perfection is not a requirement for greatness. So when you hear people criticizing the United States of America, and we go back and we ask them these questions, compared to what? Essentially, they're always comparing America to fiction. They're comparing America to utopia. And because if they really believed, for example, that Denmark, right, the Scandinavian countries, if they really believed that those countries were superior and that America was so bad, they would have left. Trust me, they would have left. That is just human nature. I mean, it's a rare person. Once again, we'll go back to the analogy of marriage. If somebody really truly believes that their spouse is that bad and that someone else is that much better, they would leave. They would leave, because people walk away from their marriages all the time. They would leave. But they haven't left because they don't really believe that that other place is better. I've traveled enough around the world, and my wife and I have plans to travel even more. But my world travels and me living overseas for almost 15 years of my life, the thing that it did for me was gain a greater appreciation for America. So, like James Brown said in the song, I feel good. Living in America, I feel good. It's got its problems. It's got its faults, its flaws, it's got its warts. But doggone it, it feels good to live in America. Because there's no place better. Seriously, if there was some place that you could show me or prove to me is so much better, I would leave. But there's no place better. So, I feel good. I feel good being in America. I appreciate the gift, the blessing of being born an American. And you should too. Once you've really looked around and you know how to accurately judge and how to compare, make a fair comparison. Look at the data. And ask yourself, at what cost? If you could leave, which you can, there's no one stopping you, and there's someplace better, why don't you? You don't leave because there's no place better. So anyway, hey, Sue, Joe, all the others who I've seen who've commented, thank you very much for listening in. Thank you guys for being supporters of Unhyphenated America. And I hope you continue to share this. By all means, share the videos, share the webpage with your friends and family, even the ones who don't think like we think. And, maybe they'll learn something. Take care and God bless.